Hi, everybody. I'm William Tyree, CMO of Intelligence Bank and co-host of the Brand Intelligence Podcast. I'm joined by Trevor Ausbruch, who leads Product Marketing Intelligence Bank. Hi, Trevor.
Hey, how you going?
Good. This is going to be fun. Today, we are going to talk to you about the state of B2B content marketing and the critical content you need to build and convert pipeline. So, just kind of getting into it, the first thing we'd love to do is just talk a little bit about the baseline categories that we talk about. Everything that we do, we tend to do in three buckets. It's capturing demand, creating demand, or converting demand. And I think if you're really running a solid B2B content program, you're absolutely going to need to make sure that you have the critical content pieces for each bucket. As we go through, we'll talk a little bit about some of these content pieces can be used across buckets, but our main thing today is to really hit like the big pieces that you might not be thinking of in the same way. So first, let's just go over some content trends. Essentially, one of the things that's really interesting that we've been seeing, not just this last year, but the last 2 years, is this big explosion in content volume coming out of marketing teams. So 50% almost more content from 2024 than 2023. How do we know? Because we run Intelligence Bank. It's a content operations platform with customers in 50 countries. And, this is the second straight year that we've seen these gigantic increases in volume, even though a lot of marketing departments don't have more people in them. In fact, a lot of them have fewer people in them. And we know that a lot of the increase here is due to increases in efficiency aided by either generative AI, regular old traditional AI, or other types of automation. And it creates opportunities, but also risks. So I guess, Trevor, just kind of like looking at that next stat there, where 45% of these people have no usage guidelines for AI. Just curious, like what kind of things would you include for content creators in those
Yeah, so
guidelines?
when it comes to usage guidelines for content creators, I think there's a few key things that we can look at when starting to create guidelines. To start off, things like tone of voice. So, what is your brand tone of voice? What is the way that you as a brand like to write content? And that could include things like avoiding the use of cliches or avoiding the use of certain language and phrases, which doesn't align to your brand. And that's just going to be a good way of making sure that the content you create with AI doesn't end up sounding or looking exactly like anyone else's and putting your own lens over the top of it. Obviously, after that, it comes to things like fact checking and verification. So AI is a great tool to help increase the speed and amount of content you can produce, but it still needs to be fact checked and verified. And the best way to do that is through a really clear approval process, making sure that every piece of content goes through that process in the best possible way, particularly relevant if that content has been created in some way by AI.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Another thing that stands out here is obviously we've seen the huge rise in video content consumption, especially on social channels the last few years. LinkedIn is not TikTok yet, but it's on its way. Those are some pretty big numbers in terms of year-over-year increase, right? So I guess my question is, what kind of videos do you feel like we're seeing useful in B2B versus elsewhere?
Yeah, I think a big trend or a big insight is that people don't like to be sold to. They like the authenticity of LinkedIn. And that can come through very much into the way videos are produced. Highly produced, slick video content just looks like ads to most people. What people are interested in is things like seeing the product in use, seeing genuine, authentic people talk about the product and the problems it solves for them. So when it comes to that, accuracy in terms of truly representing the product is much more important than flashiness of an ad and the budget you put behind the ad. And showing that product in real life situation through video is something that businesses are seeing positive results from.
Yeah, I guess you could say it seems like people in LinkedIn then are responding to the same types of videos in some ways that they're responding to in Instagram and other channels, right? Things that are, if you will, it's cliche, but maybe more authentic.
I think it is a cliche, but sometimes cliches are true. It's that authenticity that people are craving that show how a product can solve problems in real life situations. And they're much more interested in that. We know that one of the top things that buyers are looking for is show me the product, show me how it works, and show me how I can use it. And that's going to have a lot more cut through than a highly produced, very expensive video ad.
Yeah, totally. All right. The last thing here that we want to call out, it's a segue, actually, the first thing we're going to talk about is some data from Navitech. And they are showing essentially just a much higher engagement rate of product tours than videos. And I think that's really directionally useful data for all of us. So I don't know, why do you think that product tours are getting a better engagement rate on B2B websites than video?
Yeah, it sort of follows up on from what I mentioned before about the videos. So I think once a prospect has shown at least some interest in a B2B brand or a product, the top things they want to know after that is what does it do? How does it work? What does it look like? How can it help me? And the reason why a product tour, for example, could be more impactful or more effective than a video is because people want hands-on experience. They want to see how it looks. They want to play around with it themselves. And product tours are a genuine reflection of what a product does, and it gives the prospect the chance to see it for themselves in a way that a video can't offer, because the video you have no control over what you see. It's pretty much you get what you're given, and that's not the same with a product tour.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, let's keep going on that. So this is our first kind of like spotlight piece of content, just product tours, and there's a lot of ways you could justify product tours, but I personally love them for converting that all that demand that you're already driving to your website. So Trevor, you want to lead us through this?
Yeah, so that report that just came out from Nevada shows that only 11.9% of B2B websites actually give prospects the opportunity to take a self-guided tour of a product. And that means that a whole lot of businesses are missing out on a massive opportunity to fulfill one of the wishes of B2B buyers. And that's what I mentioned before, is to actually see and experience the product without needing to book a full half hour or hour long demo. They want to see it first. They want to play around with it so they can feel a lot more confident taking the next step. Last year, just to give you an example, at Intelligence Bank, 39% of all high intent engagements on our website was via a product tour. And they also had a really significant impact on opportunities created. So we know that a large amount of opportunities and deals that we ended up delivering, the prospect had done a product tour either before a demo, but quite often, like in the weeks following that initial demo, to help them get a much sort of a deeper understanding of what the product is. Um, and we can find that product tours can be used in a whole bunch of situations, and they've been really, really effective. There's that sort of first stage when it comes to awareness and engagement. And it's just a really good low friction way to get someone to engage with your brand or with your product without that commitment to book a demo. It's also a good way for building retargeting audiences. So you can have a really strong call to action, say from a LinkedIn ad that goes to a product tour, and you can just get them to experience the tour without needing for them to fill in all their details and take that big step to book a demo. Having said that, it is really good for lead generation. It definitely was and is for Intelligence Bank, capturing information from prospects who you know have a genuine interest in your product. Otherwise, they wouldn't take the time to fill out a form and take a tour. But as I mentioned before, they're also really, really useful for prospects post demo. So you have that first demo. There's only so much that a sales rep can show a customer at any one time. And we find that they're really effective for saying, hey, we've shown you this demo. It was a top level a top level view of what the product does. But here, go and check out these 5 or 6 or 7 other features and capabilities of our product and share them with other people around the business so that they understand the value that our product can deliver as well. And it doesn't rely on having to have those one-on-one conversations.
Okay, so I love what you were just saying there. I want to go back though to something that you said in the beginning, which is a little bit shocking. I feel like that 11.9% of B2B websites, this feels like when you're really into uh like a singer or a band and they feel like they're the biggest band in the world, and then you find out that their album sales or their streaming numbers are really, really low. Um,
Yeah,
I can't believe it just because maybe it's just the brands that I really like on or really love all have product tours, but that's really a useful stat because there's, I guess, adoption is still so low that you can really, really differentiate just by offering product tours at all right now.
absolutely. It's a massive opportunity. So I think when you look at that stat, it is low. Well, that just goes to show that if you do have it, you stand out from the crowd.
Yeah,
I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. It solves a problem, or it solves a key need for
yeah,
someone looking for a product. They want to see it, they want to experience it, and that's something that B2B SaaS brands just haven't done in the past. It's been gate kept, and having that tour allows people to have that experience, and it just gives people a bit of an insight of the capabilities of the product that can absolutely be expanded upon by a sales rep in an actual live demo.
yeah, completely. Which, by the way, let's talk about one reason why that number might be so low, and then we can talk about if you're a marketer out there and you want to make a case for product tours. And by the way, we have no skin in the game. We just had a lot of success using
Mhm.
them, but we have no partners or anything like that. But it's really been good for us. And I think a reason why it's still just at 12% might be because there's sometimes pushback from your sellers when you start like showing more and more of the product in terms of the form of product to where sellers can start thinking like, wait, that's my job. You know, y- marketing's job is to create meanings for me so that I can actually show the tour. I don't want you guys showing the tours. Um, I think though that if you think about these though as like the movie trailers for the really, really good demos that your sellers are gonna obviously give, that's really the way to make the case, which is think about like if you were out there promoting a movie, how many people are you gonna get to your movie if you don't show even a trailer out there? Today, nobody. Nobody's gonna show up just based on the title alone or like, a piece of paper or just a web page. But you put out a good movie trailer out there, you might have a chance at getting people into your theater. And that's what I think we're doing. Marketing's job is to create really compelling, really short form, just show enough of the product to get the buyers really interested. And then I think hopefully then you have some intent data for your sellers. And then your sellers can really blow them away with a complete tour or tour that's really tailored to them. I don't know. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what you mentioned at the end there about it being tailored and customized towards them, for them, I should say. The product tour is great for that sort of top level overview for that sneak peek that just gives people a bit of an insight of the value of those great moments that they'll have by using your product. And then the sales rep can come in there and provide that really, really detailed, customized experience based on the discovery that they may be doing about that particular prospect to show how it could work specifically for them. And quite often we find that we get people taking product tours as sort of the initial point of contact, and they come in with great questions for sales reps to answer. And that would never be available if it wasn't for that tour being there in the first place.
That's right. Cool. All right. I want to move on to our second kind of piece of converting content, which is deploying IT or RevOps content.
Yeah, I mean, this is I think been a really big development for us at Intelligence Bank, and I kind of see no reason why it wouldn't work for many, many other businesses. So, in B2B sales, like generating leads and then converting those leads into opportunities is obviously a huge challenge and a key component of any marketing team's activity. But then obviously converting that into a deal at the end is just as challenging or even more challenging. And I guess traditionally that's been the role of sales people to take that lead and that opportunity and turn it into a sale. But there's absolutely key roles that marketers can play in producing and distributing content to help support that and to help that process go faster and smoother. And one of them is to actually start to target the influencers involved in a business purchasing that particular piece of software. And we have had great success in targeting people in, say, IT roles and RevOps roles. So once an opportunity has been created, once the sales team is trying to close a deal, it's been the responsibility of the marketing team to try and identify those key influencers in IT and RevOps roles and target them with key pieces of content that's going to give them the confidence that this solution is the right thing for their business. So why do it? Well, they're often gatekeepers. They're highly influential and they sit on buying committees. They often have control of the budget itself to purchase software. And this can be particularly beneficial when it's a brand new product or a brand new solution that a business is looking to buy. So they're not changing vendors; they're just looking to get a new solution. And half the challenge is for people to convince those key stakeholders that it's going to be value for money and it's going to be worth it. So we found that after an opportunity has been created, we will start to look for key decision makers within that business, and we will hit them with a variety of content to help make that decision easier for them, or to even just demonstrate the value of our product. And there's a few value props that we use on an ongoing basis. So try and demonstrate that a product can be used across departments and can centralize data. Ensure that that we mention that AI it's a core part of the product, because we know that a lot of IT teams have said that AI needs to be a core component of any new software that is purchased. It can demonstrate that software can be consolidated into one, so there's cost savings there. That it integrates with the rest of a business's tech stack, that it's very, very quick to deploy, that you can get it up and running quickly and get to value fast, as well as fulfill all the very, very strict security requirements that we know pretty much every enterprise business has in order to stay secure. But William, like, these are sort of the value props and the people, but I'd be curious to know like the sort of content that you'd recommend businesses produce, and then how to actually get it to them.
Yeah, sure. And by the way, shout out to we Chief Martech here, who I think about 3 years ago, we started noticing that a lot of buying committees suddenly had IT, like they were back. Like I remember when it was all IT, and then kind of went for many years, like you sold directly into line of business, whether it's like HR or sales or marketing departments or whatever. And now there's a lot more consolidation. IT has these mandates, right? To make sure that in many cases, the software we're purchasing will work with like much of or the entire tech stack across departments,
Yep.
that it's adding value across departments. And I think that, there's some companies out there doing a great job. Like there's a screenshot here from Apollo. I think Apollo is a great example of a company where there's a lot of content on there, and a lot of it is not necessarily like targeting those people in specific roles, but it's very easy to find. So I would just say devote ample areas of your site footer, your top nav, to pages talking about these concepts, right? Um, like what can your software replace? Like, can your software replace three other solutions? If so, make a case for it, because that is definitely an IT mandate right now at a lot of companies, especially enterprise companies. So one is just making sure that you have the digital data so that an IT person typically won't be leading that search for new software. But once like somebody on who's leading that committee makes a recommendation, you can bet that they're going to be visiting your site and they're going to be looking for content that validates that. I think the second thing is there's an example of an ebook there called How Intelligence Banking Tables Enables IT to Drive Value Across Departments. And, that's something that's really useful to give to your sellers. Because a lot of times, account executives are trying to move deals that you've helped generate forward, and they'll hear, okay, IT has all these questions about how it's going to do X, Y, and Z. Being able to say, okay, here's like a document that reframes the entire value prop through the lens of IT. Like you might not think about your product, for example, as like assisting in like data centralization. But if it does that, that might not be anything that you mention to the people you're selling to, but IT cares. So just think about all those things in security and most of all, the integration story. It's just so critical. If it doesn't integrate with most of your stack, it's probably not going to get adopted. Cool. All right. Well, moving forward, let's talk a little bit about lead capture. So, this is going to get a little bit fun because we're going to talk a little bit about, the gating versus not gating debate. But before we get that, um, long form original research. So, as a CMO, I've always loved it when you see people that are very opinionated in they could be in your professional networks like Pavilion. It could be people on LinkedIn, and they declare things that are dead, right? So I loved it like way back. I remember in 2008, SEO was dead, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad you think that because I'm gonna actually take all that market share with SEO. And obviously, it's not dead. Email became dead in like 2010, right? Um, on and on and on. The latest thing to become dead by people in the know is long form content. And I partially agree. So, for example, a part something that used to be in my B2B playbook that is no longer in the playbook is like gating ebooks, telling you how to do your job better, essentially, right? Like how to be, I think, like a better agile marketer, right? For a common frame of reference, right? Things like that. Sorry, it's not going to really drive value. It's probably not even that related to your product. But what I do know that people still love is original research. So let's talk about kind of some of the examples for this. So think about every analyst group out there, Gartner, Forrester, and all the other analyst groups. A lot of their business model is actually predicated on publishing research, right? Because people need to know how to buy, they need to know buying trends, yes, some strategic trends and things like that. And Gartner actually has that original data that you can't get anywhere else, right? And they'll actually use snippets of that research out in a variety of mediums to try to drive you then to be a customer and get access to this data all the time, which is great. So nothing's changed for them. They're more successful than ever right now. And I think every company out there needs to kind of look internally and say, what data do you actually have that can, be amalgamated, be anonymized, and be actually useful for the people you sell to, right? Example for us, we sell to in part to people who do marketing compliance. So we automate marketing content compliance reviews in a variety of industries. One of them is financial services. So we have the research, we have the data, we have the insights on what the trends are, what people need to watch out to, how you can avoid penalties, and of course, like how companies are actually moving from manual reviews to automated, right? So that's an example where people come to our site like every single week and download that stuff. And they're very happy actually to give over their personal information and the corporate information to get that original research because that has value. It's something that they can't get anywhere else, right? Um, in another example here, state of the interactive product demo example, that's from the company that we mentioned on here a couple times, right? Navitec. And which brings me to the gate versus non-gate debate. You've got, 3 companies here. One of them put that entire research report out there. Like, it's just out there on an open web page. We've mentioned it 3 times on this webinar already. And then the other 2 are I'd say have partial gating models. So, Trevor, I'd love like, what are some of the arguments just to throw it all out there?
Yeah, look, it's probably a bit of a false dichotomy. Like it doesn't need to be entirely one or entirely the other. And that's definitely been our approach. Um, I agree with what you mentioned before about the sort of the days of that low value content being gated are well and truly over. I think buyers to a large degree expect a whole lot of content out there that's freely available. And I think the days of doing things like gating case studies, which I know a lot of businesses used to do in the past, are well and truly over. The idea of needing to enter your details just to find some information about how a customer may have used a business's product are definitely long in the past, and that's very much a good thing. But yeah, when it comes to sort of unique content based on sort of data that no one else has access to, that provides really clear, tangible value to a prospect, I think it can absolutely be beneficial to gate a piece of content. In terms of the pros of not gating, well, obviously it reduces a barrier, and then can therefore increase the potential reach and engagement that a piece of content does receive. If the purpose of it is all about brand awareness and engagement, then it absolutely makes sense to ungate content in a similar way that the example you mentioned before. But obviously, you do lose that really clear way to, I guess, generate a lead and to track the engagement of specific prospects. And like you mentioned before, yeah, we found that when it comes to sort of key pieces of top level content, it actually is beneficial for us to gate the content itself. It provides great insight to our sales team because we know we have very interested, relevant leads within our ICP who are downloading that, because this content is specifically made for them and it specifically relates to our product. But at the same time, we always make sure that insights from that report, that snippets from that report are always available in a completely ungated way, whether it's via email, whether it's via social media posts as well. So we always have a combination of the two, but the report itself is behind the gate because we find that it provides great value to our sales team that they can follow up immediately because the content itself is incredibly relevant to our target audience.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think back to what you were saying before about, where you actually put snippets of information from that. Think about any author out there, right? If you publish a book, you're not going to give those books away for free, but what you are going to do is you're going to go on a book tour. When you get interviewed on podcasts and the news, things like that, you're absolutely going to talk about interesting moments from the book that make people want it, that
Mm.
essentially drive people to it, right? Which is great. I think my criticism for people who would put all of the entire report out there ungated is, like, I've mentioned that company 3 times on this, and they're a good company, I think, but they have no idea who I am,
Yep.
right? They could be trying to win our business right now, and we're with a competitor. So that would be
Yep.
my criticism of not even asking for a business email address for it. I'm like, "Why?"
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but I think that's a litmus test, right? Where, like, is what you're offering high value? And if it is high value research, and you can't get it anywhere else, say it's at least worth a business email address. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think, look, like I mentioned before, um, back sort of 5, 10 years ago, businesses were gating literally everything.
yeah,
And quite often the content had no relation to the product that they were selling. So it really was low intent
yeah,
content that was kind
totally.
of junk for a sales rep picking it up. And, you'd put them on an email nurture after that. But given that the content itself wasn't relevant enough to the buyer, it was a little bit of a waste of time. Whereas when we have high value content that specifically relates to our product and tries to address problems or gives insights that our target audience actually cares about, then it can be absolutely valuable to at least request a business email address for content like that.
Cool. All right. Next, back in the kind of create demand category, talk just like briefly about like influencer marketing. So, um, I was listening to something the other day where I heard, oh my God, like B2B is starting to do influencer marketing. No, they're not. I mean, influencer marketing has been a thing in B2B forever, right? But I do think it's changing a little bit. And I think what's changing is I remember like a time when brands felt like they had to go out and get like a true like A-lister or at least a B-lister, like a real kind of a real, really big influencer to try to be their spokesperson or whatever. I think now the thing that you can do is work with micro influencers. And there's multiple ways to do that. So I think that's what we want to talk about is how do you get some of these folks um, to work with you? So, I think what we're talking about with a micro influencer is someone who's like famous within their industry niche, right? It's interesting talking about like how to measure them with LinkedIn followers. There's people out there with like 10,000, maybe 15,000 LinkedIn followers, which isn't a lot, who, I mean, they've got a tribe that follows them around for sure on LinkedIn, and people hang on their every word because they have so much expertise in like that one category. Trevor, I'd love to kind of just get your thoughts about the kind of people, like if you're not going to look to grow your own influencer within your own company, like what are you really kind of looking for in terms of like the type of person?
Yeah, like I think the word thought leader is one of those very overused words. Like it's almost become a thought leader is anyone that produces any old content and puts it up in a LinkedIn post.
Yep.
Um, there are out there though some genuine thought leaders within specific niche areas who create original content. They have original ideas. They have different ways of thinking about things and they want to enact change. And they've got a really good way of presenting that to their audience. And I think they're few and far between, but the ones who do it well are very, very influential. And you can see that because you'll usually get copycats who produce basically the same content within the next few months after they do it. So I think in terms of what makes someone genuinely effective, it's the people who are actually thinking of new ideas and they're thinking of it first and they're presenting it in a way that no one else has done it before, rather than simply rehashing the thoughts of someone else to jump on the bandwagon. So I would always look for people who are out there with a brand new idea, who aren't making bold and ridiculous claims just simply to get attention, but are simply framing their views in a really clear and concise way, and quite often in a very, very specific way, in a very niche way, very specific to an industry, but has a lot of truth to it. Like it makes a lot of sense because they are really focusing on one or two new ideas, and they're genuine experts in their field.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's well said. And I think the other kind of aspect of this that we can talk about is like how to go about these relationships. What kind of relationship is feasible depending on your budget and
Yeah.
your goal. So I think the simplest is contract based, and that's where you have some thought leaders out there who are very open to doing videos like around your product. And I don't necessarily mean I don't think what works in B2B is like a commercial, right? Like you hear on a podcast, like, when I eat this kind of trail mix, I feel really good, that kind of stuff. I think for the most part, it's like saying, like, okay, let's say that you're doing sales software and you approach like a really, really world famous seller with a couple best selling sales books out there. You would be giving them access to that. And for a fee, they might do some webinars with you, or they might do some presentations with you where they talk about their sales process. And yeah, it's almost like branded content where they're going to drop your name a few times, right? They're going to say, yeah, so I boot up the software and I do this and that and that. And it's just like shooting a movie and you've got the characters drinking Coca-Cola in a movie, right? Now, a lot of even micro influencers don't want that kind of relationship though, right? Because they want to seem more neutral and they want to seem more trustworthy. So I think, the next one that is a little bit more complicated, the results are not as predictable, but it's really inclusion and thought leadership. And this is accessible to even marketing departments who have zero budget. If you had zero budget, let's talk about like Chris Walker, for example. I think he's a person that a lot of marketers and salespeople know. For the last few years, he's been highly accessible for this kind of tactic. So Chris is out there. He's building his brand out in the world for him. But man, you got to hand it to him. Like even really tiny podcasts have been able to get Chris Walker on over the years to get him to come in. He's going to talk about what he wants to talk about. But, um, you know, the association of somebody really smart like that with your brand on your, presentation brings a little bit of cachet and helps you get the word out, especially if he shares that, right? Um, um, you know, th I think the last thing here, though, is kind of the big bang. The big bang is acqui-hire. So, that's where you get somebody who's already developed a property, right? Like a really big podcast, for example, that is followed by everybody in your industry. It could be a newsletter that's followed by everybody in industry. You actually say, "Hey, I want you to become a contractor or like an employee in my company for 2 years." And then at the end, you actually own the property, right? I've done that model myself. It has its upsides and downsides. It can be far less expensive than buying advertising into that category. So if you were to actually model it out and say, what's the cost of buying a podcast with the talent attached that reaches that audience every single week versus buying ads into that? Probably going to find that the acqui-hire is better. I think the trick though is you have to be very, very aligned with the talent and make sure that um, they're going to want to actually, be aligned with your business objectives. I don't know.
Mhm.
Thoughts, Trevor?
Yeah, look, it's definitely a um, an option that is, I would say, high risk and high reward. So
Yeah.
to actually get that effort to spend the money, get someone fully on board, but they would need to be someone who is genuinely part of your team and genuinely loves the product and can work really well with you without whilst not being completely independent like they may used to have been. So yeah, I think it's high risk, high reward.
Cool. All right. Lastly, let's hit a bit of technology talk. So obviously, if we were to sketch out, the tech stack that you would need to move across like all these growth stages, maturity stages, it would be really, really busy. So what we've tried to do is pull out just some of the really essential technologies that you need to get the right message in front of the right buyer at the right time. So let's maybe talk about one in each category. Looking at that kind of early stage left, Trevor, we've covered product tours, automation. I would say we can probably both agree that kind of like baseline is unless you're one of those folks that believes email is dead, you're going to need something to create and segment lists, send out, your all your outbound emails and create forms on your website for lead enhancement and all enrichment and things like that. Right. Um, let's kind of go to that second category then. I mean, Trevor, I know you're a big conversational intelligence fan in terms of listening to call recordings, right? Or video recordings. You want to maybe talk a little bit about why that might be an essential piece of, content software for marketing teams?
Because there's no replacement for hearing insights directly from prospects and customers.
Yeah.
So you can do all sorts of customer research. You can take your best guess, but you will never get better insights than actually listening and watching to a lot of sales calls and
Mhm.
genuinely understanding the problems that your customers are facing and seeing those great aha moments when they see how well your product can solve their problems. And we turn it into a routine. It's when there's great calls, we make sure that people in our team actually watch them and think about how can we turn this into content ideas, whether it's something specifically related to a product or whether it's just a piece of educational or informative content that can help inform a new blog article, a new guide, a new video, or something like that. So I think at any stage of a business's maturity, having the ability to get really great insights from actual buyers and turning that into great content ideas is going to be a huge help to help create really impactful customers and prospects that actually influence them in a really strong way.
Yeah, absolutely. It can even sometimes be validating. I mean, mostly we're looking to learn, but we had something, within the last few months where we had a call, one of our reps with a buyer, and they said, "Hey, we downloaded actually this piece of research, and this
Mhm.
list you
Yeah.
had it describes our problems exactly." And that's really great if you're doing content marketing for B2B because you want to know that your customers feel like you understand their problems the best. That's the main thing. And that's what it's all about is if you're in that inside the voice of the customer, it's like, what are the problems? How can we help? Um, cool. One that I wanted to cover here, I think it's worth hitting is real-time engagement. So we're talking about tools like qualified drift signals that offer contextual information in context depending on where people are, right, on the website. Yep, they can have 24/7 chat ability, things like that. But I think it's more about delivering the right message, like in the context of that moment, right, in a way that nothing else can. So, for example, if you have a page on your website called Why Choose Us, or a page, say, on a specific integration, like, you can pop up a message right there in context and say, like, "Hey, are you looking to get more information about our integration with this? Here's a link to a piece of content that will help you, know more about that, and by the way, if you wanna talk to a rep, like, here's a way to get to it right away." So, I think that's really, really big, and then kind of more controversially, but has a lot of momentum, the next frontier is the AI SDR, right? And that is a much more advanced way than to be able to say it's this agent, an AI agent essentially, that's going to know so much about the person visiting your site in terms of what they've seen and able to actually put even a much more tailored piece of information out there, right? So Trevor, I think going over a column is digital asset management. There's a call out here for AI usage within digital asset management, specifically, um, like face recognition, object recognition. I know that one of the things we saw in our report was that marketing teams are using face recognition, object recognition about 7 times more than they were like year over year. Like, why do you think that capability for kind of managing content is helpful?
Well, I think when you get to uh, a larger business, it's all about scale and efficiency. So you've got a huge business out there producing a huge amount of content. And a key consideration is, yep, sure, we've got a larger marketing team, we've got more demands to produce more content, but given the size of the business, how can we still make sure that stuff just gets through really, really quickly? How can we keep producing content in a really, really fast way in the same way that a smaller business might? Because quite often a larger business actually means more roadblocks, more red tape to go through, more complicated processes. But things like facial recognition and object recognition and AI tagging within a digital asset management system are essentially things that help facilitate that, um, help marketing teams work faster. So they've got a much better ability to find the right people, to create content, to ensure that they've got the right things like talent release forms, the right permissions to use images of people for all their content, and it just speeds the process up in a much better way. So producing more approved content in a much faster way.
Yeah, well said. I think the last thing just to kind of hit here is demo automation software. So, if your company is of the size where you've got a pre-sales team, those pre-sales folks are very specialized. They're very expensive. I think initially demo automation software was really invented to try to save time, right? So that they're not out there wasting time giving demos to potentially people who might not be a great fit, right? But I think it's also great for buyers and it's great actually for marketing teams because invariably what you can do with this, and there's companies like Go Consensus out there that do this really, really well. It's a little bit like the product tour, but actually like in video form where people come to your site and you can basically take them down a journey, right? Take them down a journey in which they're consuming videos based on what they're interested in, right? And it can be incremental and iterative as well. So it can be really powerful. I think the main thing is to make sure that marketing is using it in a way so that your sales team actually gets more qualified buyers and you're using those videos again, kind of like the product tours as like almost like movie trailers to try to get people
Yeah.
interested. What are your thoughts,
Yeah.
Trevor?
I think that's the key. It's really about giving your prospects an experience of the product that suits their specific role, that gives them a really good understanding of the capabilities of the product and how it can solve their problems. And what that does is you actually have better qualified leads for sales teams to pick up. You're not getting people who have zero experience of your product or zero understanding of what it is and who have to start from zero. You're getting people who actually have an understanding and they're showing some interest, so that they're warmer leads with a much higher chance of converting and converting faster.
Well said. All right. Well, thanks everybody to joining us. Uh, Good conversation. If you'd like a copy of that 2025 content trends ebook, be happy to send it to you. Reach out to Trevor or me on LinkedIn or visit us at intelligencebake.com. And thanks so much to Signals for having us on.